at Grandma's birthday banquet. She asked me to choose a partner for an arranged marriage. I glanced at Ethan, who was dressed impeccably, exuding a cold and distant aura as if nothing could touch him. Then my gaze shifted to Noah, who was bickering with a little boy over a lollipop. I pointed at him. When I stepped into the banquet hall, the first person I saw was Ethan. He stood there tall and straight, his posture like an icy, untouchable mountain. My eyes couldn't help but be drawn to him in the crowd. Ethan noticed my gaze but turned his face away, his indifference exactly the same as it had been in my previous life. I turned away and walked to the farthest corner from him. I didn't want to linger, fearing I would drown in the flood of painful memories from the past. May the birthday star live as long as the eastern sea and as enduring as the southern mountains. Amid the cheers, Grandma was wheeled out of her room on the first floor. Mason pushed through the crowd, searching for me. When he spotted me, he called me over. I walked to her side and knelt down next to her wheelchair. "All the kids from the Bennett family around your age are here. See if there's anyone you like," she said, gesturing toward Ethan and Noah. I glanced at Ethan again, his cold and imposing demeanor making him seem unapproachable. Then I turned to Noah, who was still squabbling with the little boy over a lollipop. I pointed at him. In my previous life, I had chosen Ethan, but even up until the day I died, I never earned his love. He thought I had forced him into the marriage. He treated me colder than he treated his employees. I naively believed that with time, I could melt his icy heart. Instead, he flaunted another woman in front of me, bringing her home to provoke me. When I demanded a divorce, he refused. Even in death, he bound us together, tormenting each other to the bitter end. Now that I had a second chance, I refused to live that kind of life again. When I pointed at Noah, the room fell silent with shock. Ethan abruptly raised his head to look at me. Earlier, when I turned to make my choice, his eyes had been closed. How could he have noticed? Someone in the crowd tried to speak, but was hushed. The old ladies here don't say anything. The shock was understandable. By this point in time, I had been pursuing Ethan for half a year. I delivered meals to his office 3 times a day without fail. On weekends and holidays, I went to his company to wait for him. My persistence had made me a well-known fangirl of his, but Ethan had never once agreed to eat a meal with me, let alone go on a date. Many in both the Carter and Bennett families knew about my unrequited feelings for Ethan, but had kept it from Grandma. They were afraid that if she found out about my feelings, she would force the engagement. Ethan, being the rebellious type, would only make things worse and upset her. Grandma had brought up this arranged marriage now because her health was failing. She wanted to fulfill the engagement. There had arranged before his death. As the only granddaughter of the Carter family, Grandma cherished me deeply and wanted to see me settled with a good match before she passed. The Bennett family owed a great debt to the Carters, so they left the matter entirely in our hands. I looked at Noah and asked, "Do you agree?" Noah, who was usually aware of my feelings for Ethan, seemed frozen in place, lost in thought. I worried he might reject me. My gaze instinctively shifted back to Ethan, but no, that was absolutely not an option. Just as I debated whether to pull Noah aside for a private conversation, he suddenly spoke. "You chose me." He turned sharply, looking at me in disbelief. His abrupt movement caused the lollipop in the little boy's hand to fly into his own. The boy immediately burst into tears, but Noah quickly clamped a hand over his mouth, his posture awkward and undignified. A derisive laugh echoed across the hall. All eyes turned to Ethan, who smirked coldly and stared at Noah with contempt. The atmosphere in the hall grew tense and awkward. I ignored Ethan. Despite his young age, he had already taken control of half the Bennett family's business empire and was used to doing things his way. I turned back to Noah and repeated, "Do you agree?" I stared at Noah and asked him again. Beads of sweat formed on my forehead, betraying my nervousness. I wasn't sure what he was thinking. In my previous life, I hadn't paid much attention to him, and now I felt a growing sense of urgency. Noah looked at me for a moment before nodding. I finally let out a breath of relief. What a good person. I'd have to thank him properly later. He must have been worried about me losing face and didn't want to reject me in front of everyone. After all, we'd had no connection before this moment, and until today, I'd been obsessively chasing after another man. Any other man in his position probably wouldn't have agreed, but now that I've been reborn, I know that Grandma's passing is only a few days away. If Noah hadn't agreed, I wouldn't have been able to find someone else to put Grandma at ease and allow her to leave this world with peace of mind. In my previous life, I had chosen Ethan. To my surprise, he didn't reject me outright at the time. Instead, he had a private conversation with me afterward, explaining that he had agreed only out of consideration for Grandma's health and telling me not to overthink it. When Grandma passed away, she held my hand together with Ethan, urging us to take care of each other. After her funeral, Ethan's parents began pressing for our wedding. I thought we hadn't spent enough time together and worried he would feel forced into it, so I kept delaying. But Ethan agreed before I could say anything, telling me not to play coy. He said he wouldn't disobey Grandma's dying wish. Not long after, we got married. There was no ceremony, just the formalities. Our relationship before and after marriage didn't change much. Aside from moving in together, there was little difference. For 5 years, I remained cold and indifferent to him. Other than a few social events I had to attend with him, he rarely spoke to me. One night, I worked late and a colleague offered me a ride home since it was on his way. Ethan happened to see us when he got home. Perhaps it triggered his possessiveness, but he rushed over and punched my colleague. That night, we had a huge argument, the first real fight since I had met him. After that, he stopped coming home regularly. Angry and hurt, I didn't try to patch things up. We were locked in a Cold War until the day he brought another woman home, holding her close as if to flaunt her in front of me. That was the final straw. I wanted a divorce, but he refused. We remained trapped in a cycle of mutual torment until the day I died. All right. Grandma's cheerful laughter pulled me out of my thoughts. It was the first time I'd seen her so happy since she had fallen ill and become better than 6 months ago. She held my hand, giving me a few words of advice before chatting with some of her old friends. When fatigue overtook her, she had the attendants wheel her back to her room. Left to myself, I scanned the room until I spotted Noah. I walked over and pulled him aside. "Thank you for helping me. Don't feel pressured. Once Grandma has passed peacefully, we can—" I began, but Noah suddenly raised his hand to stop me. "Don't move. Stay here and wait for me." Then he ran off toward the Bennett estate next door. Less than 5 minutes later, he was back carrying a box. Opening it, he pulled out a stack of certificates. I majored in computer science in college. These are my competition award for back then. I'll admit I've always been a bit laid back, but I'm not dumb. I can code and develop programs. I won't be aimless or starve just because my family doesn't help me out. As he spoke, he pulled out a property deed, 2 car keys, and a bank card. This is what I earned from developing games with friends. The apartment is a 2-bedroom unit in the city center. Nothing fancy, but the location's good. As for the cars, there are 2 of them. If there's something you like, feel free to use it, Noah said. There's only about $1 million in the account right now. Not much, but you can spend it. I'll make more, a lot more. Don't worry. With that, he shoved the box into my arms as if afraid I might refuse it. Don't misunderstand me, he added quickly. You chose me, didn't you? Even though we're just testing the waters as a potential match, and you might not choose me in the end, I want to be upfront with you about everything. You don't have to do the same for me. This is just how I am. He waved his hands nervously, as if worried I'd think he expected the same openness from me. I thought you wouldn't agree, I murmured, looking down at the box in my arms, my emotions tangled. I'm happy to, Noah replied, looking directly at me, his tone serious and deliberate. You chose me. That makes me happy, so you don't need to feel guilty or thank me, and you definitely don't need to end things after your grandmother passes. I lifted my eyes to meet his gaze. We held eye contact for a moment before suddenly he bolted. No, I called after him, holding the box. He waved a hand without turning back. I'm not good at making girls happy. Take it. If you decide later you don't want to be with me, we'll deal with it then. And then, in a flash, he disappeared through the door. I couldn't help but marvel at him. He was too well raised, offering everything he had just for an experimental match. Didn't he worry about being cheated out of his entire savings? The weight of the box in my arms felt overwhelming as I stared down at it, trying to decide what to do. A shadow loomed over me. I looked up and found myself face to face with Ethan. His mocking gaze pinned me in place. Playing hard to get? Does it feel fun? I blinked, momentarily stunned, before realizing what he meant. You think you picked Noah as a marriage match just to get my attention, don't you? Ethan sneered, his lips curving into a sarcastic smile. Last night, you braved the rain to bring me dinner, left a note with Ted reminding him to take care of me, and handed him an umbrella and cold medicine just in case. And now, this morning, you suddenly chose someone else. Aside from trying to get back at me for shutting you out of my office last night, what other reason could you have? You realize that constant effort doesn't get my attention, so now you're trying reverse psychology? His sharp words hit me like a cold slap, and for a moment, the memories from my past life surged back. Back then, I had been utterly infatuated with Ethan, chasing him to the point of throwing away my dignity. No matter how coldly he treated me in front of others, I clung to the hope that he would one day reciprocate my feelings. It was no wonder he found it unbelievable that I'd suddenly chosen Noah, but I never expected his reaction to be this intense. You don't even like me. Shouldn't you be happy that I've stopped bothering you? I asked, looking straight at him. For a brief second, Ethan hesitated, his gaze faltering, but then he looked back at me, his expression cold once more. Don't flatter yourself, he snapped. Do you think I'm the slightest bit agitated because I like you? Stop being delusional. I just can't stand the thought of losing to someone like Noah, a wife from that kind of family, he added, his voice dripping with disdain. His words didn't surprise me. Ethan and Noah were both from the Bennett family, but Ethan was the eldest grandson of the main branch. His parents held esteemed positions in both politics and business, commanding respect wherever they went. In contrast, Noah's father stayed out of family affairs, choosing to be a professor at a prestigious university, while his mother was an actress, a profession looked down upon in elite circles. From a young age, Ethan had shown exceptional talent, his photographic memory and sharp intellect, making him the pride of the family. Noah, however, had to work much harder to achieve even a fraction of Ethan's success. To make matters worse, he had abandoned the family business path, choosing instead to pursue programming and game development. His rebellious choice had angered the family elders, who eventually gave up on him entirely. They excluded him from family business activities and events, leaving him to fend for himself. The box in my arms grew heavier, my hands beginning to ache as I pieced together the situation. Ethan's disdainful words rang in my ears, and the weight of his judgment pressed down on me even more. I didn't want to keep entangling myself with Ethan any longer. Since things had already come to this point, it was time to lay everything out clearly. I stared at him. Ethan, I don't like you anymore. My choice to not pick you and to choose Noah today has nothing to do with you. You can rest assured you don't like me and you hate Noah. Perfect. From now on, we can go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. With that, I turned and walked toward the door, but suddenly Ethan grabbed my wrist. What are you doing? I snapped, twisting my wrist, trying to pull away, but his grip was unyielding. You say you don't like me anymore? He asked, his voice cold. Under the dim light, Ethan's eyes were dark, like a bottomless frozen abyss. Let go of me, I demanded, glaring at him, my words firm and deliberate. Instead of loosening his grip, he held on tighter. I don't believe you, he said icily. I was momentarily stunned, the memory rushing back. Once, I had a necklace I didn't want anymore, so I carelessly tossed it into a pond. That night, I came down with a fever. A rumor spread that the necklace had been a gift from a family member, and my illness was a result of losing something so sentimental. In the dead of winter, Ethan had jumped into the freezing water to retrieve it for me. He ended up with a high fever for 3 days, teetering on the edge of life and death. You were someone willing to risk your life for me, Ethan continued, his voice low and intense. How could you just suddenly stop liking me without warning? So he had known about the necklace all along. I had made sure to keep his secret, worried he would feel burdened if he knew. Yet he had known everything. A bitter laugh rose in my heart. How ridiculous I had been in my past life, giving my whole heart to someone who knew but never cared. To him, Our marriage had always been forced, something I coerced him into. He resented me for it, and his coldness, his silent neglect, lasted a lifetime. The love I gave with all my heart must have seemed utterly insignificant to him. Let go, I repeated, but Ethan's grip only tightened. The pain became unbearable. I couldn't hold back a cry. Finally, his grip loosened slightly, and I took the chance to wrench free and rush inside. I slammed the door shut, separating him from me. Once inside, I quickly headed up the stairs to the third floor and into my bedroom, ensuring no one saw the expression on my face. The moment I shut the door behind me, my strength gave out, and I slid down to the floor. Past life, the end of it all, I couldn't help but harbor resentment. Ethan had always had a choice. Not to marry me, not to accept me as his arranged partner, not even after Grandma's passing. Yet he did marry me and then blame me for everything, dragging us both into a lifetime of misery. His initial decision was made for Grandma's sake and later out of obligation to her final wish. But no matter the reason, it had all started because I had chosen him. At the banquet, I couldn't deny it. The suffering I endured in my past life was the result of my own choices. A thud snapped me out of my thoughts. The box Noah had given me tipped over, spilling the bank card, property deed, and car keys onto the floor. It was a stark reminder that those were events from another life. I patted my face lightly, trying to pull myself together. This life would be different. I wouldn't make the same mistakes. The next morning, I was jolted awake by one of Grandma's attendants urging me to wash up and come downstairs. I thought Grandma needed me for something urgent, but when I reached the living room, I saw Noah waiting there. He had swapped the casual t-shirt he wore to last night's banquet for a sleek black suit. It made him look far more formal. "Good morning, where's Grandma?" he asked. I greeted Noah with a nod and glanced around, but I didn't see Grandma anywhere. She asked Mrs. Jang to take her to the back garden for some fresh air, Noah explained, his face slightly flushed. She also said she wants us to move in together, he added, lowering his head as his ears turned red, as if they might start bleeding from embarrassment. When Noah mentioned this, it reminded me of my previous life. After I chose Ethan as my marriage partner, Grandma gave us a house the very next day, insisting that we move in together to build our relationship. "Do you not want to?" I asked, seeing how flustered Noah looked. "No." Noah immediately lifted his head, blurting out, "I'm willing." His gaze met mine for a brief moment before his face turned crimson. He quickly looked away, avoiding eye contact. His shy and innocent reaction to relationships made me feel a pang of guilt. After experiencing the pain of a failed marriage in my previous life, I had no expectations for love in this one. To me, this arrangement was merely to give Grandma peace of mind. But for Noah, he was dragged into this arrangement because of my choice. If he had no feelings for me or didn't hold any hopes for this relationship, it would have been easier for me. While Noah and I were chatting, my luggage had already been packed by the house staff. At some point, Mrs. Jang had returned from the garden and handed me a set of keys. "The old lady has already transferred ownership of the house to your name," she said. "It's the closest and best one near your workplace." In my previous life, I had been thrilled at the opportunity to live with Ethan and accepted Grandma's arrangement without hesitation. But now, knowing Grandma only had a few days left, I just wanted to... Mrs. Jang seemed to notice my hesitation. She placed a hand on my arm and said, "The old lady just asked for water again. She's not in great shape and doesn't want you to see her like this. She's lived a full life, seen everything, and has no regrets. After your grandfather passed, she felt life had lost its meaning. But when your parents had their accident and you were still so young, she pushed through with the company, also losing a pillar. She carried the weight all these years. As long as you're happy, she'll leave this world without regrets." I knew that everyone had already noticed how frail Grandma was. She spent more than half her day asleep now, and there was no telling when she might not wake up again. That's why she had left the hospital and returned to the family home, wanting to spend her final days there. I nodded silently, the heaviness in my heart growing. The driver eventually dropped Noah and me off at the house. Grandma had arranged the cool autumn breeze that brushed past us, carrying the familiar scent of osmanthus blossoms, pulling me out of my thoughts. Noah stepped out first, then walked around to open my door. I looked up at the house, a place so familiar it felt like it was etched into my bones. But as I prepared to step out, my foot felt as if it were weighed down by 1,000 pounds. In my previous life, Ethan and I only stayed in this house for a few days before Grandma passed away. After we married, I moved into Ethan's home, and this house remained empty. Later, during our Cold War, after Ethan brought another woman into our home, I moved back here alone. Ethan followed me, claiming he wanted to keep an eye on me, afraid I'd bring another man here and embarrass him. He even used it to block my attempts to divorce him, saying, "You forced me into this marriage, so you'll suffer through it with me for life." I couldn't stop Ethan from moving in, but this house was a gift from Grandma, a place that symbolized her hopes for my happiness. I didn't want a third person to invade it. I made my boundary clear. Ethan surprisingly didn't push further and accepted it. After that, we returned to the way things were early in our marriage, cold and distant. He focused on his work every day, and I stayed in this house, trying to carve out a semblance of peace. I focused on my own life. I no longer tried to warm Ethan's cold demeanor with my enthusiasm. I stopped delivering meals to him, worrying about him being too hot or too cold, and I even began avoiding the times he was home unless it was absolutely necessary. I made sure we didn't see each other. That was how we lived for 2 years, distant, cold, and indifferent, until I was sent to a remote mountain region on a business trip. A sudden earthquake ended my short and painful life. This house carried so many painful memories that I didn't want to step into it at all. "What's wrong?" Noah finally asked, noticing I hadn't gotten out of the car. His eyes widened when he saw my pale face. "Are you feeling unwell?" He looked at me nervously. His hand reached out slightly, as if he wanted to check on me, but didn't dare. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead. "I'm fine," I said, steadying his slightly trembling hand and meeting his gaze. "I remember you have another house nearby, don't you? Could I stay there instead?" The moment those words left my mouth, I regretted them. But if I stayed at another house owned by the Sioux family, Grandma would find out quickly. "Don't worry, it'll just be for a few days," I quickly added. "I'm allergic to osmanthus flowers, and the smell is too much for me here. Once I find a place I like, I'll move out." Noah froze at my words, then snapped back to reality when he heard about my allergy. "Allergic to osmanthus? That's my fault. I didn't even know, and I let you sit here and smell it for so long. Are you okay?" His gaze darted across my face, neck, and hands, scanning for any signs of a rash. "Do you feel itchy or uncomfortable?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "Severe allergies can be life-threatening." He pulled out his phone, ready to call for an ambulance, but I quickly stopped him. His anxious actions eased the heavy weight in my heart, and I found myself smiling. "You didn't know I was allergic, so it's not your fault, and it hasn't been that long. Nothing serious. I'm not feeling unwell right now, but if I stay longer, who knows?" I said lightly, lying effortlessly. As soon as I finished speaking, Noah hurriedly shut the car door and quickly got in on the other side. He gave a driver an address, and soon we arrived at his building. The driver helped carry our luggage upstairs before leaving. I stood by the door waiting for Noah to unlock it, but he didn't move. I turned to him, puzzled. Looking embarrassed, Noah lowered his head and said, "The key is in the box I gave you last night. There's only one." He raised his hand slightly, as if to emphasize this point. "Just one key? You gave it to me?" I asked, surprised. "I was too excited and didn't think it through," he admitted sheepishly. "I live alone, so I never made a spare." Looking at his awkward demeanor, I couldn't help but tease him. "What if I hadn't come here today? How would you get into your own house without the key?" "If I gave the key to you, it's yours now," Noah replied seriously. "I can always stay in my office." I shook my head, amused. He was definitely the type of person scammers would love, a genuinely trusting soul. I opened the box of my luggage, pulled out the key, and unlocked the door. The moment the door swung open, I froze. The interior was decorated entirely in pink. "You like this?" I asked, turning to him. Noah opened his mouth to explain, but fell silent when his eyes met mine. After a moment, he nodded reluctantly. Maybe my curious stare made him uncomfortable because he quickly averted his gaze. "Don't be shy. There's nothing wrong with liking pink," I said, trying to reassure him. "Who says boys can't like pink?" Noah didn't respond. Instead, he lowered his head even more, his face burning with embarrassment. I stopped teasing Noah and stepped into the house. As I walked ahead of him, once inside, the overwhelming pink decor hit me even harder than it had at the door. From the entrance, I had only seen part of the hallway and living room, but now standing in the center, I realized that everything from the bedroom doors to the kitchen and bathroom was pink. This wasn't just a preference. It was true love for the color. Fortunately, I also like pink. For someone who loved the color, this house was paradise. The walls, decorations, sofa, and even the tiled floors were all pink. In my previous life, I loved pink too. I had once considered brightening up the cold black, white, and gray tones of the home Ethan and I shared by adding pink accents, but Ethan thought pink was childish. He wouldn't even let me wear pink dresses to formal events. Over time, I suppressed my preferences, choosing everything I ate, used, and wore based on his tastes. Back then, I didn't feel wrong because I loved him and thought his happiness was mine. But now, standing in a space decorated exactly how I liked, I realized how much joy came from pleasing myself. There were 2 bedrooms in the house. I pushed my luggage toward the guest room, but Noah stepped in front of me. "This is my room. You can stay in the guest room," he said softly, as if worried I'd mind. I looked at him, surprised. "You don't mind?" Noah nodded. "I'm busy with work and don't stay here often. The guest room is fine." It felt a bit strange for him to sleep in the guest room in his own house, but he clearly didn't want to discuss it further, and I wasn't one to pry into other people's private matters. I let it go and started unpacking. Once I finished, I realized I was hungry. Skipping breakfast and moving had kept me too busy to notice, but now that I had time to relax, my stomach started growling. Just as I was about to order delivery, the scent of scallion pancakes wafted through the air. I opened the door and followed the smell to the kitchen, where I found Noah wearing an apron and frying scallion pancakes. A pot of milk was warming on the stove beside him. "You didn't eat breakfast this morning, and there's not much in the fridge," he explained. "This will tide you over for now. Delivery food isn't very clean. For lunch, I'll take you to a private restaurant nearby that I like." Looking at his back as he worked, I suddenly felt a lump in my throat. This was a scene I had often fantasized about in my previous life. After my parents passed away, I had longed for a warm, loving home of my own. But after marrying Ethan, the times we ate together were few and far between. I was always the one delivering meals to him, reminding him to eat, while he never showed any concern for me. I thought I didn't need someone to care for me. But in this moment, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet warmth. When Noah turned around with the food, I quickly wiped away my tears and sat at the dining table before he noticed. He placed the pancakes and milk in front of me and sat nearby, watching me eat. "This house, feel free to renovate it." "I don't mind," he said earnestly as I ate. "I'm only staying for a few days," I replied. "There's no need." But Noah seemed genuinely enthusiastic, as if we were discussing a bright future. Not wanting to dampen his mood, I didn't argue further. Later, Noah took me to a private restaurant he frequented for lunch. To my surprise, we ran into Ted, Ethan's assistant, there. The moment Ted saw me, his face lit up like he'd found his savior. He hurried over. "Miss Sue, I can't believe I ran into you here. This is perfect. Why didn't you bring breakfast or lunch to Mr. Carter today? He hasn't eaten anything." I tried ordering food for him, but he refused both breakfast and lunch. I had no choice but to ask my team for advice. They told me the food here was quite good and suggested Ethan might like it. So I came over. "You know Ethan's taste better than anyone, Miss Sue. Why don't you help me pick out a few dishes for lunch? If I bring them back, I'm sure he'll be happy," Ted said eagerly, looking at me with expectation. I knew Ethan wouldn't like anything I chose, but I didn't want to brush Ted off completely. In my previous life, Ted had been kind to me when most of Ethan's company employees mocked me behind my back while I pursued Ethan. Ted was the only one who offered me encouragement and sympathy. He once told me about his younger sister who, like me, had chased after someone she loved. At the time, he didn't understand her and had tried to stop her, but after she passed away from illness, his greatest regret was holding her back. From then on, his outlook on life changed. "If you want something in this short life, go after it," he said. "Life is only about 30,000 days long. Why not live true to your heart?" But having spent a lifetime with someone who didn't love me, my perspective had shifted. Some things simply weren't meant to be. Forcing them only brought harm to everyone involved. "Miss Sue, you're not like that." Ethan ate every meal you sent him. Even though he never let you in, he never threw anything away. "If you just keep trying, you might succeed," Ted encouraged me, unaware of the changes in my life. He didn't know I'd already chosen someone else as my arranged partner and thought I had simply grown disheartened. "That won't be necessary," I replied, pulling Noah with me toward a private room nearby. Ted stood frozen, staring in the direction I'd gone, as if struggling to process what he'd just seen. Midway through lunch, my phone buzzed with a notification. I opened it to see a message from Ethan. "You went out to lunch with Noah?" "It has nothing to do with you," I replied. Ethan's next message followed quickly. "You deliberately took him out for lunch and made sure Ted saw it. Isn't this just a way to get my attention?" I didn't even wait for him to finish typing. I blocked and deleted him without hesitation. "Who was that?" Noah asked, placing a plate of peeled shrimp in front of me. "No one," I replied, turning my phone face down on the table. Picking up my chopsticks, I sighed. Nailed the end of the conversation. Noah didn't ask further. However, throughout the rest of the meal, he seemed unusually quiet and distracted. "What's wrong?" I asked, thinking he might not feel well. He shook his head, then suddenly brightened. After lunch, he suggested we go to an amusement park together. I declined, explaining that I wanted to check in on Grandma. "I'll go with you," Noah said, his eyes hopeful. In the end, I agreed. I thought Grandma would be happier to see the two of us spending time together than if I went alone. When we arrived at the Sue family home, Grandma was resting, so we didn't disturb her. Instead, we returned to Noah's house. The next day was Monday. I went to work at my job, and Noah headed to his company. Unlike Noah, I had no interest in the complexities of the business world and hadn't joined the family company. After finishing graduate school, I took a job at a research institute. It was a steady 9 to 5 position with standard holidays. The workload wasn't heavy, my boss was kind, and my colleagues were easy to get along with. When it came to work, both in my past life and now, I found satisfaction in its simplicity. I was content with my life and never felt wronged in any way. The days passed as uneventfully as they had in my previous life, except that the home I returned to was now Noah's, and the person I interacted with daily had changed from Ethan to Noah. This was a positive change. There was no longer an oppressive atmosphere or the constant need to tiptoe around someone's feelings. During this time, I visited Grandma a few times. Noah seemed to sense the importance of these visits and always accompanied me. Thursday came quickly. It was the day Grandma would pass away. That afternoon, I received a tearful call from Mrs. Jang, telling me that Grandma didn't have much time left and wanted to see Noah and me one last time. I immediately called Noah to let him know. He told me not to worry and came to pick me up. Together, we rushed to the family home and to Grandma's bedside. Just like in my previous life, Grandma took my hand and placed it in Noah's, telling us to take care of each other. Under her hopeful gaze, I nodded firmly and tightened my grip on Noah's hand. Noah squeezed back, his hold steady and comforting, but this time I knew I couldn't fulfill Grandma's wish. I would disappoint her. I silently promised myself that when I saw her in the afterlife, I would beg for her forgiveness. In my previous life, Ethan and I had spent our entire lives trapped in a painful relationship because of this final wish. I didn't want Noah to go through the same. He deserved someone who could love him wholeheartedly and spend a lifetime of happiness with him, not someone bound to him by obligation and moral expectations. With Grandma's deteriorating health, her funeral arrangements had already been prepared. The ceremony was simple and concluded quickly. Ethan didn't attend, as his parents explained that he was on a business trip abroad and they didn't want to distract him. During his travels, they decided to tell him about Grandma's passing after he returned. In my previous life, On this exact day, Ethan had also been scheduled to leave for a business trip abroad, but I had insisted he stay, dragging him into my grief and anxiety. Without my interference this time, our lives had stayed as parallel lines, barely intersecting. In truth, Noah and I were no different. We were also parallel lines, each walking our own path. After the funeral, I intended to move out of Noah's house. Over the past few days, I had been searching for a new place and had already found one. However, on the way back, I suddenly felt dizzy and fainted. I woke briefly to the sound of Noah's panicked voice, and I could feel the car making a sharp turn as he told the driver to head to the hospital. I didn't want to go. The hospital reminded me too much of losing my parents. The smell of disinfectant and sterile water filled me with dread. Noah had no choice but to take me back to his house instead. After that, I lost consciousness again. When I finally regained some awareness, it was faint. I vaguely saw Noah sitting by my side, using a towel to cool my forehead. "Don't worry, it's okay now," he said softly. "The doctor already came by. He said you're just overwhelmed with grief and haven't been resting well, so your body gave out temporarily. You'll be fine with some rest." I drifted off again, the exhaustion pulling me under. The next time I woke up, I was parched. I tried to open my eyes, but couldn't. My body felt as heavy as lead, making it impossible to move. Water, I managed to croak out. Almost immediately, a cup of warm water was brought to my lips. After that, I woke up intermittently. Each time, Noah was there. He was either cooling my forehead, sitting nearby, working on his laptop, or simply watching over me. His attentiveness was remarkable. Any slight movement I made, and he was instantly aware. At first, I thought he was just pretending to work on his laptop, but as the programs on his screen grew more complex and detailed, I realized he was genuinely working. His dedication and focus made me smile despite my condition. That night was the first time in years I'd fallen ill so badly, and the first time I felt so cared for. It was ironic that the person taking care of me was Noah, someone I barely knew before this arrangement. When I finally recovered, I knew I had to express my gratitude. I resolved to properly thank Noah for everything. I thought I would recover by the next morning, but my condition fluctuated for 3 days. During that time, Noah helped me take leave from work and stayed home with me the entire 3 days. When he wasn't checking on me, he was busy working on his programming. It was clear he had a lot on his plate, yet he never left my side. By the evening of the 4th day, I felt significantly better. My body was regaining strength, and I decided to get out of bed and fetch a glass of water for myself. I tried to be as quiet as possible, but even the smallest sound, and it seemed to alert Noah, who was outside on a work call. "What are you doing up? Did I wake you?" he asked. Hurrying over with concern, I shook my head. "I just wanted to get some water." "Stay still. I'll get it for you," he insisted, treating me like fragile porcelain. He helped me back into bed before striding out to fetch the water. I felt a little helpless. "I'm fine now," I said after finishing the glass he handed me. Noah reached out to lightly feel my forehead. "It's back to normal," he said, "but seriously, recovering from illness is like pulling out a thread, slow and delicate. You still need a rest. I've already extended your leave for a week. Use the time to fully recover." I wanted to protest, but when I met his earnest gaze and noticed the stubble on his cheeks from days of neglect, I could only nod. After sleeping for several days straight, I didn't feel like resting anymore. Sitting up in bed, I picked up my phone and had just unlocked it when a sudden flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by a crack of thunder. In an instant, a shadow fell over me, and I felt warm hands covering my ears. "Don't be afraid," Noah said softly, his voice soothing. "I'm not scared," I replied with a smile, gently pulling his hand away. Noah looked at me in surprise before quickly stepping back. "I wasn't trying to," he began, flustered. "When it thundered, I thought you might be scared. How did you know I'm afraid of thunder?" I asked, curious. Even Ethan hadn't known that about me. On the night of my parents' car accident, there had been a thunderstorm. Ever since, I had dreaded stormy nights. But during my marriage with Ethan, I endured countless thunder-filled nights alone, teaching myself to suppress my fear. Those long nights helped me realize I was no longer the cherished princess my parents had once doted on. I had to face everything alone. Over time, I got used to it. I heard it from a friend. Noah explained, looking sheepish. Most girls are scared of thunder, so I just assumed. His voice trailed off as he left the room, only to return a moment later with a glass of warm milk and a vintage record player. Listening to music helps calm the nerves. A better mood might help you recover faster, he said, placing the items on the bedside table. Soft, soothing music began to play in the background as Noah picked up his laptop. Now that you're awake, I'll stay in the living room so you can have some privacy. If you need anything, just call for me. With that, he gently closed the door behind him. Left alone in the room, I looked around, surrounded by pink walls bathed in the soft glow of the warm light. The music played softly, and a glass of milk sat invitingly on the bedside table. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. The gentle warmth of the room, the soft glow of the lamp, and the soothing music made me forget about the storm raging outside. I thought I had overcome my fear of thunderstorms long ago, but now I realized that it hadn't disappeared. It had just been buried deep within me. The past, those stories, my nights always left me tense. Yet tonight, I felt completely relaxed and at peace. Something in my heart seemed to have shifted. I caught a glimpse of myself in the dark reflection of my phone screen, noticing the faint smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Suddenly, a chill washed over me, extinguishing that warmth. I patted my cheek, slightly snapping myself out of it. No, this can't happen. No one can be anyone else's savior. I can't afford to have emotional expectations of anyone. The reason I had chased after Ethan so desperately was because of something that happened 6 months before. At a banquet, he had stood up for me when I was humiliated. Before I was 5 years old, my life had been carefree, but after my parents' accident, I became quiet and withdrawn. Grandma cared deeply for me, but she was getting older and had many other grandchildren to look after. She couldn't focus all her attention on me. Besides, the bullying among children was something adults could never fully understand. Gradually, I lost all my friends and stopped wanting to go outside. The banquet in question had been for the 90th birthday of one of Grandma's oldest friends, a woman who had been very kind to me as a child. I decided to attend, but during the event, someone intentionally spilled wine on me and mocked me, calling me mute. The crowd around us merely watched, entertained by the spectacle. At that time, I didn't know how to stand up for myself. All I could do was silently pray for the ordeal to end quickly or for Grandma to come find me. What I didn't expect was for Ethan to walk into the hall and see the scene unfolding. He stepped in and defended me. He was the first person outside my family to ever publicly stand up for me. I clung to that moment, projecting my emotional needs onto him. I sought the security and sense of belonging I had lost. That was why I didn't care about the ridicule or his indifference. I just kept chasing him, throwing myself into the flames over and over again. But after decades of a painful, entangled marriage in my previous life, I had learned my lesson. No one could save me but myself. Seeking security from someone else was just trading one abyss for another. What had seemed like heroism to me was, in Ethan's eyes, a minor incident. He only helped me because of the long-standing friendship between the Sue and Carter families, not because of me as a person. I should be grateful for his kindness, but I shouldn't have placed my emotional dependency on him. The same applied to Noah. He was kind to me now because I was his arranged partner. If it were someone else, he would treat her just as well. Without expectations, there would be no disappointment or pain. I already had my own way of living in this world, one that protected me from getting hurt. There was no need to gamble on an uncertain future. When I recovered, I told Noah I planned to move out. He stayed silent for a long time before replying with a single word. Okay. I moved into a new apartment closer to my workplace. I had inherited plenty from my parents and Grandma. So instead of renting, I bought a place. That way, I could decorate it however I wanted. Yet every time I came home to the same pink walls, I couldn't help but feel like something was missing. One evening after work, just as I was about to head home, someone stopped me. I looked up and saw Ethan. I just found out about your grandma, he said. I was abroad for a while. Are you doing okay? It had been a while, I replied, remembering that it had been over 2 months since Grandma's funeral. I'm fine now, but thank you for asking, I answered out of politeness. But Ethan felt different this time. His demeanor wasn't like the aloof, immature Ethan I remembered. His gaze carried a steadiness that reminded me of the Ethan I had come to know at the end of my previous life. I tried to discern something in his eyes, but I saw nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. It's not safe out here at night. Let me take you home, he offered. There's no need, I replied. I live nearby. It's only a 10-minute walk. I replied firmly, turning down Ethan's offer without hesitation. To my relief, he didn't press further, but he also didn't leave. Do you still need something? I asked, looking at him. Can you add me back on WeChat? Ethan asked, his tone unexpectedly soft. I promise I won't bother you again. I just want to stay in touch as friends. I shook my head. There's no need. We work in different fields and won't cross paths in the future. Now that Grandma's gone, I don't visit the family home much. We probably won't see each other again, and that's fine by me. Ethan fell silent, the atmosphere growing tense. I'm leaving, I said, turning to go. But before I could take a step, Ethan grabbed my arm. You and Noah, he started, hesitating. I know you've moved out of his place, and the two of you haven't seen each other in a while. You don't love him, do you? You only chose him to fulfill your grandmother's wish. I could have done that too. As her grandson, I could have honored her wish. I had no idea what had gotten into Ethan after his trip abroad, and I didn't care enough to find out. I shook off his hand and prepared to leave. But as I turned, I saw Noah standing not far away. The moment our eyes met, Noah turned to walk away. Noah, I called out, stopping him in his tracks. He didn't turn around. If you keep walking, I'll make sure to turn and run every time I see you in the future, I threatened, half joking but determined. Noah froze, his steps halting. Ethan, still standing beside me, spoke again, his voice laced with familiarity that sent a chill down my spine. Mamu, he said. The nickname made my skin crawl. Don't call me that, I said coldly. We're not close. I pulled away from him and walked toward Noah. Why were you running away when you saw me? I asked, looking directly at him. I didn't want you to see me unhappy, he murmured, his head hanging low. When did I ever say I didn't want to see you? I countered, confused. Noah hesitated before continuing. If you wanted to see me, why did you move out of my house, wasn't it? Because you were uncomfortable being with me. I hadn't expected him to think that way. Lowering his gaze further, Noah added, I know you like Ethan. I didn't want to make things harder for you. As he spoke, he turned to leave. If you take one more step, I said, grabbing his arm, I really won't want to see you again. He froze, then quickly turned back, gripping my arm tightly. His nervous expression made it hard to suppress the smile, threatening to surface on my lips. My water is out at home tonight, I said, clearing my throat. Can I stay at your place for the night? Noah stared at me, stunned. Is it inconvenient? I asked, feigning indifference. No, it's not inconvenient at all, he replied hastily, pulling me along toward his house. His steps were quick and hurried. Realizing I couldn't keep up, he slowed down and glanced at me. I don't like Ethan anymore, I said softly but firmly, and I never will again. After a long pause, I heard a quiet, okay from beside me. When we reached Noah's house, I realized what had been missing in my own. A home with someone waiting for me, lights on when I returned, and the warmth of someone who cared. 2 years later, I accepted Noah's proposal. On our wedding day, midway through the ceremony, Ethan's parents abruptly left in a panic. I didn't learn the reason until the banquet was over. Ethan had attempted suicide. Thankfully, he was rescued in time. His mother begged him with all her heart and soul, convincing him to abandon the idea of taking his own life. 2 weeks later, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. That very day, he booked a plane ticket and left the country. He never came back. 5 years after his departure, I received an anonymous text message. I'm sorry. It was the same day I had died in my previous life.